Hi, everybody. You might be approaching the end of your financial year, and it's the perfect time to get your Sage 50 accounts in order. The year end process itself is simple. It doesn't matter if you're a seasoned pro or if it's your first time, it's just a few steps in the wizard. But before you dive in, there are some important checks and housekeeping tasks that will just make everything run smoothly. Things like archiving your company data just keeps it organized and improves performance. We'll show you how to create an archive and why it's a good habit. Then there's backing up your data, which is essential before making any changes, and we'll share best practice just to ensure your backups are reliable. And avoid accidental postings into a closed period by setting a lock date. It's quick to do and it saves headaches later. We'll also guide you through the year end wizard as well, step by step, so you can complete the process with confidence. If you need to tidy up old or unused records, we'll show you how to do that as well in our Delete Your Records webinar. And then we'll also cover how to clear the audit trail. It can help speed things up, and we'll explain when it's appropriate and how to do that safely. So, to help you to prepare, we're hosting a series of live webinars throughout January and February. These sessions will give you practical tips and demonstrations so you feel confident about your year end and keep your accounts in great shape. Don't miss this opportunity to start the new year with clean, organised data and peace of mind. Make sure you reserve your spot today at sage.co.uk/webinars, and we look forward to seeing you there.
Hi everyone, it's that time again when you might be starting to think about your year end. The year end process itself is straightforward. It's a simple wizard that includes a few options. However, before this, there's the preparation stage, ensuring you've posted everything, and of course, it involves running reports. But do you understand your reports and also the opportunities that you have to develop them? Ensuring they're accurate, but also that they provide you with a correct level of detail. Throughout January and February, we're running a series of live webinars to help develop your knowledge and understanding of the management reports available in Sage 50 accounts. We'll be starting with the basics, understanding nominal records and the structure of the nominal ledger. This is also ideal if you need to create new nominal codes. Following on from this, we'll examine the chart of accounts, looking at all aspects, including adding new layouts and editing existing ones. Our attention then turns to the management reports themselves, the trial balance, the profit and loss, and of course the balance sheet. We'll explain how to run them, what they show, and most importantly, how the figures calculate. We want you to be confident. On the management report session, one of the most common scenarios we're asked about is where you haven't yet run your year end, but need to generate a profit and loss report for your next financial year. We've got your back with this and have a specific webinar that explores the options you have available, whether it's running reports for your new financial year or even a previous one. The last webinar in the series looks at reconciling your age debtors and age creditor reports at year end, ensuring that the balances agree with the figures on your trial balance and the balance sheet. Of course, this could be done at any time, such as part of your month-end process. So come along and we'll demonstrate what to check and how to run them to ensure everything agrees. If you'd like to attend any or all of these sessions to help develop your knowledge and boost your confidence, then simply head along to sage.co.uk/webinars and register for your free place. These, along with loads of other topics, including how to run your year end, are available. See you soon.
Hello everybody and welcome to today's webinar where we're going to be looking at going back to basics and looking at backing up the data along with checking the health of your data as well within Sage 50 accounts, and that's going to be presented by myself. My name's Laura and I'm going to be the host for this morning, and we've also got Michael on the background there who's going to be answering any of your questions as well. So if you do have any questions, make sure you get them popped across just to keep them busy. Just as usual, before we get started, just those housekeeping rules there. So your mic will be muted automatically, but you'll see there is a little question icon on the toolbar where you can submit those questions to keep Michael busy. And just make sure you get them popped in there. Any questions that are off topic, we will try and answer those, but we'll prioritise anything relating to backing up and checking your data today. I will be including the slides in the handout section as well, as there are some links at the end which you might find useful. So if you do want to download those, make sure you do that during the session. And there's also that printer friendly version if you'd like to print it out to make some notes. So this is what we're going to be looking at covering today. So we're going to have a look at why you should back up your data. And I'm going to be going through some demonstrations around why it's important to back the data up. We'll be looking at how to take a manual backup, what the schedule backup function is, how to restore a backup into the program, and also how to manually check your data without taking a backup. Then we'll have a look at summarising everything we've covered at the end of today's session there and just look at further support. So the process of a backup is to take a copy of all the files that make up your company, including things like the username and passwords, and it consolidates them into one compressed file. This can then only be accessed by restoring the backup into Sage 50 accounts. Some scenarios where we recommend taking regular backups are if a process does not go as expected. So if you've done something in error, for example, if you've reconciled a VAT return accidentally. Although individual transaction can be reversed, you can't reverse the whole process. Or another example may be if you've imported the wrong file and you've now got duplicate transactions. Yeah, you could manually delete them, but it might just be easier and quicker to restore. Disaster recovery. So, for example, touch wood, say your computer breaks down or you end up with a virus leaving you unable to use the software and you need to move all of your data to a new computer. If you're the sole user and you need to move to a new computer just because you bought a new PC, you can take a full backup and after installing Sage onto your new computer, restore that backup in. If your data becomes corrupt, again, touch wood, and the errors are unfixable, you could be required to restore a backup or an error-free backup into the program there. And the reason for that is just because the data files are on your computer have become damaged. So this is why it's always important to be frequently checking the health of your data. And we'll have a look at how to do that as well. So the importance of backing up your company is to ensure that your data is backed up at least once a day, depending on the amount that you process. If you process every day, then take a backup every day. If you process just once a week, then you'd be fine just taking a backup once a week there. The last thing that you would need in the event of one of those examples that we've just looked at there is that you don't have a recent backup and there's a lot of reprocessing to be done. For the backing up your data while others are still working message. So sometimes you might have seen it if you've got multiple people logged in, you try and take a backup and it tells you that you can't because other users are still working. If you do get that message telling you that you can't back up while other users are logged in, this is something that you can change within settings, and we'll have a look at that in the demonstration as well. So I'll show you how you can, there's a little tick box you can tick and essentially the program will take a snapshot of all of the data, and what it'll do is it'll then check the data from that and back it up from that so you can just, everybody can continue working in the program. So we'll pop into my program and we'll have a look at a few things. So I'll just get Sage up on the screen there. So the first thing we'll have a look at is if you were just going to be taking a manual backup. So if we go to File at the top and we're just going to go to Backup, and it'll open this window here for us. So you might have seen this before here. So when we've opened up the backup window, we've got a number of different files here, which we can choose what we're going to be backing up there. If you wanted to back up absolutely everything, you can tick all of the boxes, or you can just select all file types to be included on there, whichever you prefer. So data files, those are the ones that's like your day-to-day processing. So when you're taking it up, back up at the end of the day, that's the main one that you're going to want to be including. Things like transaction attachments, so those would be things like receipts or attachments for invoices, might not need backing up every single day. You've then got your report files and your layout templates. So if you've any customized reports or if you've made any amendments, you can back these up. But really, they only need backing up if you've made any changes to them. So if you've just created a new report file, I would be saying take a backup of it. But if all of your reports and your layout templates have remained unchanged for the last year or so, you don't necessarily need to be backing those up every day. We've then got record attachments. So these are attachments to things like suppliers, customers, bank products, departments and projects. And then there's image files. So if you have image files attached to a product or a service record, perhaps. Again, these are things that you might not be backing up every single day. And then your company archive. So really, you don't need to be backing that up unless you've just taken an archive on there. But the company archives, I wouldn't be backing that up every day because it's a copy of your data that you've got as well there. So it's going to make the backup file a lot bigger. And then Tmail database, if you still use this function, you can back that up too. So you only really need to be backing up the data files on a daily basis. And that's only if you're processing every day, like I mentioned before there. There's no need to sort of take reports and layouts back up each time if you haven't changed anything in them for the last couple of years, for example. Another example would be, like I mentioned, the archive. It only really needs backing up when you've taken an archive. But you might want to take a full backup if, for example, like I mentioned on the slides here, you're the only user and you're going to transfer everything to a new computer. You could take a full backup, so a backup of absolutely everything on there. And then when you've installed Sage onto the new PC, you can restore that backup in. It means you've got absolutely everything, reports, archives, absolutely everything in that backup there. Another example might be if you're upgrading the software as well. You could take a full backup before that, upgrade the software, and you've got a backup prior to that upgrade. So just to make you aware where those are. So I'm just going to cancel out of that because there's a couple of other things I want to show you as well. So that's the main sort of manual way to back up there. The other place we can back up is if you're running a VAT return. So if we just click onto here, and if I just click VAT return, it'll open up that window. You'll see the first window is backup on there. And I would always recommend taking a backup because once you've sort of submitted that to HMRC, you can't sort of unchange anything once you've reconciled it, sorry. You can't sort of get back to it on there. So always take a backup. Then if you've done anything incorrectly in your VAT return, it's fine, you just restore that backup in. The other way that you can take a backup is when you're running your year end. So if you go to tools at the top, into period end and into year end, just get that message just telling it's going to close all unsaved windows there. And we've got the backup option in here. Again, always take a backup before running your year end as well. So there's a few different places where that backup option pops up, but the main one would be in file and then backup there. So as I mentioned, if you get that message telling you that you can't back up while you've got other users logged in when you try and run a backup, this is something that you can change within the settings. So if we go to settings at the top, so this is, I'm logged in as manager here, so it might depend on your user settings there, but if we go to company preferences, and it'll just ask me to pop my password in. And it'll open up this window here. And if I click on the parameters tab along the top, in the other section, we've got a number of different things in here. And on the bottom left-hand side, there's a little tick box that will say enable check data and backup with users logged in. So if you've got multiple users and you can't take a backup, I would suggest you can tick that on there. What it'll do is it will take like a snapshot of all of your data, and it uses that snapshot to check your data and back it up while everybody's working away in the live data. Just means that you don't have to get everybody logged out there. So I'm just the one user, so I don't need that done. So I'm just going to cancel out of that, and we'll look at just going and taking a backup. So I'm just going to go to File and Backup, drag that over, and say I've made some changes to my reports and my layouts. So I just want a backup of my data files and run my reports and my layouts on there. And I'm just going to take that backup. So we can see here the file name You can change that if you want to. So if you were making any changes on there, you can type in there, you can add additional detail if you want to. And you can also change the location as well. You can either just click on browse and you can select an area that you want to sort of pop that into. I'm happy with it going into my Sage Backups folder, which was created alongside the company there, and I'm using version 33. So I'm just going to say OK to that, and it'll ask me, do I want to check my data before a backup? And that's entirely up to yourself. I would always recommend checking your data on a regular basis. So if I just click yes to that, you'll see that whizzed across on there. I've got a small data set, tells me I've got no errors, no warnings, and I've got 14 comments. And I'll come onto this window a bit later, but I'm just going to close it for now. And it's just whizzing through that backup for me now, which will be quite quick on my computer because it's local, but I have included those reports and the layout files because there's an additional part that I want to show you in a moment as well. So I'm going to pop back to my slides just while that's running through that backup there, because there's some other bits I want to go through. So that's how you manually back your data up. You can see it's quite easy. We're just going to file and back it up and just selecting what I want to back up in the background there. You can also schedule your backups as well to run automatically, even if you don't have your software open. However, the machine which holds your data, which might be the computer that you're on, so that's for me, my data is local on my computer, or you might have a server that holds your data. And now that would need to be switched on when you take that backup there. So if you're not too sure how you've got the setup, if you double check with your IT there, they'll be able to clarify how you've got it set up. But for example, if you don't turn off your computer until 5 o'clock, and that's where the data is held, but you've scheduled your scheduled backup to run at 6 o'clock. If the data is local on your PC there, it's not going to run that scheduled backup because you've turned the computer off where the data is held. But if your data is stored on a server, so say you've got your data elsewhere, and that's left switched on overnight, your backup will still run at the scheduled time there. But if you're working local on your computer with your data set, if you know that you switch that computer off at 5 o'clock, you could set this to run at 4:30 just to make sure that it runs and you get that scheduled backup taken. But again, if you're not too sure how you're set up and where your data is held, you can check with your IT there, as each setup's, they can all vary. The difference there is you can be working on your computer in another program with Sage closed. So the schedule backup will still run even if you've got Sage closed on your PC there. But the main thing to remember is the PC where the data is held needs to be left switched on when that scheduled backup's taken. So you could even have it just running in the middle of the day if that's easier. But you can still work while your checks and your backups are running. It just means you don't need to worry about them. And it's a bit of a time saver as well. So if you normally have to run a manual backup at the end of your shift or the end of your working day, and you know that the schedule one's taken it, it's just another thing off the list for you. We'll pop back into my program there. My backup was successful, so that's great. So I'm just going to say OK to that, and we'll come out of that there. And we'll have a look at the schedule backup. So for schedule backup, you need to be logged in as manager. But if I go to the top here, and I'm going to go to schedule backup, and it'll open up my schedule backup window here. And we've got a few different things. So I've got 4 companies, and this gives me a breakdown of each of my companies in my schedule backup window. So if we have a look at the one that I'm currently in, which is this one, so it's got one user currently logged in, that's myself there. It would tell me we've got other people logged into the other companies, but I don't at the moment. My schedule check data found 14 comments, which we'll come on to a bit later, but it tells me when the schedule check data is on, when it was last ran, and the same for the backup as well, and it does it for all of my companies. So it just gives you an overview, which is what it's called, of your companies and what's been checked there. I've got one company where I've actually got the schedule data off, which you can just see the difference there. If we go to settings on the left-hand side, in here, we've got some further options. So within here, we've got our check data and backup schedule. It just gives you the option to enable either the check data or the backup. So I would always recommend leaving those ticked because if you're checking the data every day and you're also taking a backup every day. And you can also decide when it's going to run as well. So like I mentioned, if you know that you switch off your PC at 5 o'clock, run it before then. Use the drop down. You can choose. It's in 15-minute increments on there. But you can have it run more than once a day as well. So if you're processing a lot of data, if we switch to that, we can run it more than once a day. We can do it every hour, 3, 6, or 12 hours. And you can specify a a time to start that from as well, just from the drop down box there too. Again, in 15-minute increments. But I just have mine run once a day. Then we've got a list of my companies. So these are my companies that I am saying, right, that's an old company, so I don't process in there. I don't need to back that up. I don't need sort of additional backups taken when I'm not processing in there. So I've unticked that one. But I do use these 3 companies, so I've put a tick in those. So I know that at 4 o'clock every day, when the PC is switched on, it's going to take a backup and it's also going to check my data for me. We've then got the file types to include. So these are the ones that I mentioned before in the manual backup there. So the main one on a scheduled backup is going to be your accounts data. So that's your day-to-day processing. If you're not making changes or you're not sort of adding lots of transaction attachments, you're not regularly changing reports or layouts or anything else on there, I'd be saying really for your scheduled backup, your main one is going to be your accounts data. But you can include anything on there. It's entirely up to yourself what you want to include. The more, what I would say is the more ticks that you have in there, so the more things that you're backing up, obviously the bigger those backup files are going to be. So just to make you aware of that. And then we've got the backup location. So by default, backup files are saved to the Sage backup folder created on the C drive on the computer where you store your data. So you can store backups on any fixed drive on your server. And if required on the server, you can click on the edit, click edit there. We can change sort of the path to that if we want to. So say if I wanted that to go into version 32 folder, I can change that on there, but it'll still be on the C drive. If I use the drop down, I've also got a OneDrive, which I can click on edit on there, and it'll pop it on my OneDrive, again in a Sage Backups folder, but it'll still go to my OneDrive. But I can change, if there's a different folder on there I want to pop them into, I can change that. If you use things like Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive or Dropbox, the relevant folder is going to appear in that drop down. So on there, I've got those 2 options, my C drive and my OneDrive on there. But if you're not so sure about, how you've got that set up, double check it with your IT on there, because like I say, every setup is different. And then we've got the server disk space limit. So backups automatically save if there's sufficient space on your server hard drive or on your hard drive on your computer there. So the backup manager will create backups where there's at least 20 gig of space left. But again, you can change that if you want to on there. But by default, it'll say here that you've always got to have 5 gig of space left. So if you're running low on space where the backups are going to on there, it generally means you need to clear some space on there, because then your scheduled backup's not going to run. So if we have a look at users logged in, quite self-explanatory. So just from the left-hand side there, just tells us who's logged in to which company on there. So I've been logged into my company here since, well, for 3 hours and 40 minutes, it tells me. If I'd been in any of the other companies, it would list them here, tell me who's logged in and how long we were logged in for, and the computer name as well. And then we've got check data results on here. So this tab, you can see the results and the health of your data. So as mentioned earlier, it's only going to show the results when the machine has been on at the time of that scheduled backup that you've got taken there. As you can see, I've got mine set to 4 o'clock. So generally they've been around 4 o'clock, just for the 3 companies, because one of them I turned off the backup and the check data for because I don't use it. And it tells us the status as well. So 2 of my companies, absolutely fine, no errors, warnings or comments. But the one that I'm currently in, I have got some warnings in there. No, sorry, it was comments that I've got in there. I do apologize. So I've got some comments on there, and I'll come back onto that as well. Up here, it'll tell us automatically delete check data results older than, I've got mine set to 1 day. So it resets it every day. But you could have it where it deletes it after a week. So I would have a week's worth in there. Or if I wanted a month, it could show the last month's worth on there. And also we've got show check data results for this week. So because I've only got mine set to delete after every day, I've only got 1 day's worth of results in here. If I had, say, it's set to a month, just ask me to change that on there. I can then say, well, actually, I only want to see this week of that month, or I might want to see the full month on there. So you can have a play around with that, see how far back you want to be able to see those results. And then we've got the backup files just on the left-hand side there. So this tells us where those backups have gone to on there. I think I recently changed mine at the beginning of the week to show at least a week's worth. So I've got a few more days that we can sort of have a look at in there. So it's going back to the 9th on there. But it just tells us where the backup files are, the size of the backups as well, the version, and just the name of it. So remember, I've got those 3 companies. It's been taken those details there. So that's your scheduled backup. So you need to be logged in as manager to be able to go and have a look at that there. We just close out of that. And there's some more slides that I just want to pop in and just show you as well about restoring a backup. So we'll have a quick look at that now. So looking at restoring a backup and when you might do this. So you might have run something called the clear audit trail, which is where you clear out old transactions, but you might have cleared it up to the incorrect date. Or if you've reconciled your VAT return, which I mentioned before, that's why there's a backup option within the VAT return window. By taking a backup prior, it enables you to go back to that time and redo anything that you need to. You just need to be aware though, anything that was entered after the backup was taken would have to be reprocessed. So things like transactions. If you're going to restore over the top of live data, then just make sure you take a backup prior to that as well, because it'll overwrite your live data. So if you think, right, I need to go and restore back to 2 days ago, what I would suggest is just take a quick data files backup, then restore it in. Then if you've done anything wrong or restored in the wrong day, it's fine. You can always get back to where you were prior to clicking on that restore button. Additionally, if your data is held over a network or if you're on remote data access, if you overwrite live data, it'll overwrite it for everybody as well. If you've got a multi-company license, where you can create a new company by restoring from a backup file. So, for example, if you wanted to try an unfamiliar process, but you didn't want to do the risk or have the risk of doing it in your live data, or you've got other people working and processing at the same time, you could restore a backup into a separate company, do whatever you were going to do just to test things out, and then delete that extra company afterwards. If you're on version 30.1 or above, you can also restore a backup of your data into the practice data as well. And that's going to do the same. When you restore a backup, on the backup description box, just like on the screenshot there, you can see it's going to tell you what's been included in the backup. For example, whether it's just the data files only, or if it includes reports and layouts or an archive. And that's why I took that backup before including the reports and layouts, just to show you what it looks like so you can see what you're actually restoring in. And once the backup's restored in, you would need the logon details that existed at the time the backup was taken. As I mentioned, it copies absolutely everything. So it copies the file that holds logon details. So if they've changed, you would need to just enter those old details there. Or similarly, if your user didn't exist at the time of the backup, you would then need the credentials of a user that did exist at that time. If you don't have those logon details, though, don't worry. Or if the manager user can't get logged into them, we have a process in place where we can get those details for you. It would just be a case of giving our support team a ring and we can help you with that. So we'll have a look. We're going to go back in and have a look at what it looks like to restore it back in and also manually checking the data as well. I'll pop back into my program there. So say I needed to restore my data back and I needed to have a look at that backup that I've just taken and I just want to restore back because I've entered some transactions or I've done something incorrect on there. So all I need to be doing is going to File at the top and I'm going to choose Restore. What I will show you first, actually, so it has opened this, I'm going to create a new customer first, just to show you, because when you restore back anything that you've popped in there will no longer be showing in the actual program itself, okay? So if I go to new, and I'm just going to create a new customer quickly, We'll just put AA02 and we'll call it Andrew, so it goes near the top, and I'm just going to click Save. And then we'll close that window. And we can see here we've got a customer called Andrew. Now I'm going to look at restoring back to when I took that backup earlier on in the demonstration. So if I go to File at the top, and I'm going to go to Restore, just gives that message that it's going to close all open windows on there. That's absolutely fine. And now we've got this window here. So all we're going to do is we're just going to click on Browse, and we're going to browse to that backup that was taken just earlier on today. So it's taken me straight into where my backups are, which is on my C drive, Sage Backups, version 33. And it's this one here. So it was just at 10 past 11 this morning. So I'm going to select that one and say Open. And this is what I was mentioning here before. So we've got data files included. I've also got report files and layouts in there. So those are the backups, or the tick boxes that I selected when I took that backup earlier. So if you're ever wondering, well, what's it actually going to be restoring in? It gives you a list on here. It also tells you the company name of the backup, and it tells you the version as well. So if my version was an earlier version, so say this was on version 30, because it was a while ago that I took the backup, it'll tell me here what the version number is. And that's absolutely fine, because what will happen is when it restores it in, it will convert the data onto version 33 for me. So there's no problem with that. And then all I'm going to do is click OK to that, and we get this message. And it just tells us that we're about to overwrite the data on there. So it's going to restore data. The procedure will overwrite any data that's currently held in the company. So what it's going to overwrite is my layouts, reports, and data files. And all I'm going to say is OK to that. And it'll just whiz through on there for me. What it's doing is it's just replacing the data files in the background, the reports, and the layouts. Now, if it was just the data files that we were restoring, my reports and my layout files would remain untouched. So all it does is replace the files that are listed, which are those ones there. So it might take a little bit longer with yours, just because you might have a lot more data. It's taken slightly longer than it normally would do on mine, just because I've included those reports and the layouts. So I'll let that run through on there. It's finished. And then it'll get me to log back in. I'm just going to log in as manager. And then I'm going to pop back into customers. And that customer that I created earlier, Andrew, no longer there. And that's because I've restored to a backup that was created prior to me creating that customer there. The last thing that I want to have a look at is just the check data, so manually checking the data. So I think a lot of people might sort of just check the data when they log out at night. Do you want to take a backup? Yes. And then it'll ask, do you want to check the data? And you might just click yes then. But you can also check the data by going into File and Maintenance. Again, just the window confirming it's going to close those windows. And you'll get this window here. So there's a few different options on here, but from here we can click on check data. And if we just check the data now, it's quite quick on mine because I've got, you can see in the bottom, right, I've got a very small data set. It brings up this window here and it tells us a brief overview. I've got no errors, no warnings, but I do have 14 comments. Now, we can click on those to get more detail. Obviously, there's nothing in errors or warnings because I don't have any. But in comments, it tells me that I've got a couple of different comments on there. And comments we're never too sort of hugely bothered about the comments on there. If you have warnings, I'd be checking those though. And if you do have errors, certainly don't continue processing. Those need sorting out before you process any further, just because it can have a knock-on effect with things like your reporting as well. But if you have any errors, warnings, or comments, there is a guide on our help center, which I'm just going to show you as well. So we'll have a look at this one because it's a bit shorter. If I click on there is a little square icon, which you might find hard to see because it might be smaller on your PC, but essentially it extends them just to give us more detail on them. So we can see here we've got stock code transaction cost price is greater than the sales price, and it tells us which transaction they relate to on here. Okay. So I'm going to have a look at item quantity is 0, and it tells me that some of them are invoices and a couple are sales orders. So on our help center, when you go into our help center, if you just search for A to Z, what you'll get, and I've got it open on this screen just so I can show you, is this page here. So on our help center, you don't need to search for the whole thing. You just need to put A-Z and it'll bring up an article that's called Index of Check Data Errors, Warnings and Comments. And on here, any errors, warnings or comments that you get, all you need to do is type them into here. So if I go for the shorter one, so item quantity, and you can see it starts bringing them up. And we know that one's an invoice. So invoice number, item quantity is 0. It tells us that it's a comment, so we know that from the program anyway, but also it gives us a link to fixing it as well. So if I click on that, what it'll do is open up another page. This is the comment that I was getting on here, gives us a summary, gives us a description of it on here as well, but it also gives us a resolution as well. So it tells you how to fix it, which is really handy. So if you ever get any errors, comments or warnings, just search for that A to Z within our help center and you can type them in and it will tell you the fix for them on there, which is always really handy. Okay. And then it'll tell you what you can do going forward. What I would say is if you do have errors, like I mentioned earlier on in the slides, take a backup first, then have a look at our A to Z on there. Only reason being is if you needed to contact our support team, they like to see it before anything's been ran on the fixes there for it. So just take a backup. And if you do need support, by all means, give us a call on there and we can certainly have a look at it with you. But that's how you can check your data manually without having to go into just taking a backup. The technical information on here, we have got basically it just gives you information about your the company that you're using. So the name, logged in as, the station, the path for your data, the version. It just gives you sort of the splits and things like that, which are how many transactions you've got in the program as well. So that's all information that we would take if you did need to give us a ring with any sort of errors or warnings or anything like that. But quite handy. So that was just in tools at the top and then maintenance. If you've recently just taken a backup, you can just click on last results and it brings up the same window as well. It tells you when the report was ran as well. So we know that it was just ran today. I'll close out of that. So we'll pop back to the slides there. So when using remote data access, when using remote data access, Sage does not store any copies of your data. That sometimes catches people out and they think that actually we're storing copies of your data there. But you can select a full backup or specific areas like we've looked at. So if you just want to back up your data files, or if you just want to, you don't always have to back up your data files. If you just wanted to take a backup of only your reports and layouts, you can do that as well. But depending on what you've done, you might just want the data files only backup. If you're running a year end or a clear audit trail, you might want a full backup on there. You can check your data without having to go into the backup option as well, like we've just looked at there, just in that file and then maintenance window. And restoring overwrites the live data back to the point that the backup was taken. So anything processed after that backup was taken will no longer be there, just like we saw when I created that customer. When I restored that backup in, it was no longer there. If you're unsure, you can take a backup before restoring a backup in. So if I was going to say, right, I need to go back to 2 days ago, but I'm not 100% certain, just take a backup there and then and restore it in. If that's wrong, you can always get back to your start point again on there. If in doubt, just take that backup. That way you can just always get back to where you were. And then your schedule backup runs in the background and it checks the data for all of your companies that you've selected when the computer holding the data or the server is switched on. Again, if you're not too sure, just double check that with your IT, how you've got that set up. But it just takes that sort of needing to remember to take a backup all the time. You've always got regular backups. And then should you find errors in your data, touch wood, the backup manager can help identify when the errors occurred on there as well, just from that scheduled backup window. So you can always see when you need to restore back to if there's any sort of unfixable errors, for example. If errors were detected, you would get a message next time you log in, just telling you, and I'll pop back into my program where you can view those errors again, just to show you. So it was just within, have a quick look. You would, if you had errors, you might have a red banner across the top if you've just logged back in as well. But just in File and Maintenance, if you got a message telling you you had errors, all you're going to do is just click on Last Results, and you can view your errors in here. So it'll tell you how many errors you had, and you would just click on there and it would give you that list. So as promised, I've included some links to some useful guides in our help centre as well, which you can visit at sage.co.uk/help. That's also where that A to Z check of the data errors as well. All you need to search for that is just A/Z, and it'll bring it straight up for you. Or you can download the slides as well, and you can just click on those links there too. I'll keep this open just for a little while longer. It looks like you've got on top of everything there with the questions. I'm just having a look. There's one there from Margaret. Can you show us the display and the backup manager window again on there? That's fine. I did just pop into it there, but I'll pop back just in case you missed it. So the backup manager window on here. So if you go, you need to be logged in as manager, Margaret. And if you go to File at the top, and if we go to Schedule Backup on there, if this is the one that you were talking about, and then this is your backup manager window here, where you can have a look at your settings and you can view those options down the left-hand side as well there. So just make sure that you're logged in as manager. It'll tell you just in the bottom left-hand corner who you're logged in as well. So if it says user and then Margaret, you would need to log in as manager just to access that. I hope that's helpful there. Make sure if you've got any other questions, make sure you pop them in there. There's nothing else coming there at the moment. You can also access our webinars page as well, which I'm sure you probably know by now, but it's at sage.co.uk/webinars. And all the past recordings are free to view in here as well. I did have somebody ask the question, is there a place where I can view recordings of these webinars? They're all just on our webinars recordings page there. And we've also got the live page where you can sign up for upcoming webinars, and the link's on the slide. We've just published March's as well, so there's a new badging series in there too, all around invoicing, and we're going to be running bank feeds again as well there. So those are all in there if you want to have a look and get signed up. And we've also got our community hub, which if you haven't seen it before, it's an online forum for Sage 50 accounts users, just to share knowledge, swap ideas and solve problems together. Completely free to join. You can ask questions on there where other users, along with our Sage experts, can help and advise you. Or if you see something and think, I know the answer to that, you can pop a comment onto it too. But it keeps you updated 24/7 with what's happening, and it's also open 24/7 as well. So there's a link just on the slide there. And I have included an additional survey, which I hope you won't mind taking a quick look at. It just helps us shape our learning around what matters to you most. There is a QR code which you can scan there, and there's also a link on the slide for you too. So when you've got those downloaded, either way to access that would work. But there's no other questions come in there, so that's great. Hopefully you've sort of got everything you needed from that on there. So it brings us to the end of today's session. So I hope that you found it useful and it makes sense on why you should take regular backups, and also explains the scheduled backup option as well. But as always, you're going to get a survey when leaving today's session. So I'd love it if you could fill it in. Any feedback or any comments, we say it all the time. We really do read all the comments that come through on there as well. Or if there's anything else you'd like to see done differently. But for now, thank you for attending, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.